Thank you. I'm Kelly Davis. As Lisa said, I'm an investigator at Penn State with my colleagues Dave Almeida, Susan McHale, and Laura Klein. And we really led the development of the family interviews. So this included the interviews with spouses via telephone. In addition to the workplace interviews, we also recruited employees to do home interviews and also children aged 9 through 17 of employees at their home. To really learn more about the family side of the work-family interface. But what I'm going to focus on today is the daily diary component of the work-family health study. So those employees and children aged 9 through 17 who did a home interview, we recruited them to also participate in an 8-day daily diary, which is really an innovative approach to understand how work and family interact on a daily basis. So the purpose of the daily diary component of the work-family health study is to really understand how parents' work experiences are related to their individual health and family interactions on a daily basis. So really looking at work to family spillover. And we also examined how employed work, daily work experiences are related to family members' health. So how does work cross over or transmit to other family members? And of course, another goal is to test whether the intervention improves daily health and family life. So why do both the CAPI or the computer-assisted interviews and the daily diary? The surveys really provide background information, and they give us a picture of what people are like in general. So really global descriptions of employees, spouses, and children. And often the measures that are included are asking people to talk about how they felt in the past month on average. So really global processes. However, the daily diaries really allow us to turn down the microscope and look at micro processes. So how does work and family unfold on a daily basis? So the daily diaries allow participants to provide detailed information about each day and give us a picture of a week in the life of a person and a family. And so this is done by having employees and children tell us about how they feel each day and as well as what happened that day. So I borrowed these smiley faces from Dave Almeida, who's really a daily diary expert. And so the innovative piece about the daily diary is that you can examine move beyond between-person differences, what the interviews really do, allow you to compare people in terms of averages. So the larger smiley faces show you that some people are less healthy or less happy than others on average. But the daily diary allows you to look at within people. So some days are less healthy than others. Some days are worse than others. And you can do this for both the employee and the child to see how those two things map onto each other. So on a less happy or less productive or more stressful day, how does that then relate to how the child is doing that day? So you're really getting a window into the daily lives of working families, capturing life as it is lived. So this is an overview of the daily diary data collection. So we collected data for 8 consecutive days. And we collected data from both the employee and the child on the same 8 days. So again, we can map on what happened with the employee and the child and vice versa. So we can look from work to family and family to work. Another innovative piece of this daily diary component is that we also included saliva collection, which is a pretty non-invasive way to collect biomarker data. And so the saliva collection can allow us to assay it for cortisol, which is a biomarker, a stress hormone, which I'll talk about in a minute. So of the 8 days, there were 4 days where we also collected saliva from both the employees and the children. So we can look at self-reported stressors with objective markers of stress. And for employees, the adults, we collected data, saliva 5 points across the 4 days for a total of 20 assessments. And for children, we did it for 16 times. So we did not collect saliva from children before lunch because the logistics of collecting saliva at schools was a little tricky. So then we have a total of 16 saliva collections for children. This is just a broad overview of the diary measures that were included. So for both employees and children, we asked how they spent their time, so the amount of time at work, family time, and for children, household chores. And what was stressful about that day? For employees, did they have an argument with a coworker or spouse? And with children, did they have something stressful that happened at school or have an argument with their parent? But also we wanted to capture the positive side of things. So was there anything positive that happened at work? Or was there a fun interaction between the parent and child? As well as their daily feelings, their health, and experiences between the employee and child. And we get both perspectives from the employee and the child to see how well those match up. And as I mentioned, we also collected saliva. And the reason that we collected saliva across the day was to really capture this diurnal rhythm. So cortisol is really, it's a stress hormone, but it's a necessary one that gets you active and gets you going in the morning of the day. So you can see the cortisol awakening response, and that's really your body getting ready for the day and revving up energy so that you can face the day. And then as the day winds down, a healthy profile would be for the cortisol to decrease so that you can go to sleep and your body can then recuperate. And you can see a picture of how saliva was collected. So it was a fairly non-messy, non-invasive approach where both the employee and the child rolled a piece of cotton around their mouth for a few seconds and then put it into the tube, froze it, and then shipped it to Penn State so that it could be assayed. And here's a picture of the kits that we provided to both the employees and the children with instruction sheets, as well as a DVD that we produced that goes through all the steps very clearly, as well as a time stamper that we included in every 10th kit just to check in terms of compliance. A form about medication use, which is medication is known to affect the cortisol rhythm and levels, with a pre-incentive and as well as a pre-addressed prepaid mailing envelope to send it back to us. So we tried to make it as convenient as possible for our participants. So just to step back a little bit, in terms of eligibility, so I'd mentioned it's employees and children who had completed a home interview, and these were children that were aged 9 through 17. This age is because of what was involved with the daily diary, as well as saliva collection, and with past research, as well as our pilot study with hotel families, that this age group is able to be pretty compliant with both the diary and saliva collection. 9 through 17 is a very broad developmental period, so when there was more than one child, we asked if the youngest child closest to age 13 would be willing to participate. If not, then we would move on to the next. English speaking and biologically or legally related to the employee, and living with the employee at least 4 days a week to make sure that there's enough interaction between the employee and child. So here you can see that the TOMO diary sample, starting with the 823 employees that completed the workplace interview, down to 209 eligible parents, and that's parents with a child aged 9 through 17. And of the 209, we had 131 in the TOMO sample that participated at baseline. And you can see that, so we did the diary at baseline and at 12 months, and so at 12 months we had 102 that continued to participate. So the retention was about 78%. And then you can see the breakdown in terms of the intervention. So we wanted to make sure we sampled enough from both the usual practice in the STAR conditions so that we can compare how the intervention affected daily life in these two groups. And so almost an even balance with 41 and 61. Now here's the LEEF diary sample. And so we started with a larger number of eligible parents for the daily diary at 389, with 173 that participated at baseline, and 98 that participated in both baseline and 12 months. So you can see a difference between the two samples in terms of the retention, with the retention being much lower in the LEEF sample. And then again, not quite an even split in terms of usual practice and STAR, but you can see those numbers there. And important to note is that those who participated, started the daily diaries, were pretty compliant and they stuck with it. The calls were about 20 minutes for parents and about 15 minutes for kids. So again, we tried to make it convenient, capture a lot of information, but in a short period of time. And this is just another slide to show you. So that was based on the employee numbers. And for the most part, if the employee parent participated, the child did as well. That was a requirement at baseline, and at 12 months, a little bit more flexible because we wanted to make sure we retained as many people as possible. I'm just going to provide one example, well, two examples, this one a little bit more in depth, about how rich the daily diary data are and what they can tell us. And so this is a paper that is currently under review with my colleagues Dave Almeida, Sumi Lee, Katie Lawson, Kim Walter, and Laura Klein. And this is really looking, responding to a call to look at episodes of work-family conflict. So there's quite a bit of literature showing how average amounts of work-family conflict are related to a host of physical and psychological outcomes. But to really understand how those two things are connected, we need to look on a daily level to see how people are really experiencing these things. So the first question for this paper is, how much does work-family conflict fluctuate from day to day? And then second, to what extent is there evidence of daily reactivity to work-family conflict? So here we're focusing on the employee parents in the IT industry, or TOMO, as we've referred to here. And I won't go over the characteristics as Erin has already done so. But I will mention and remind that it's a fairly wealthy population. So for this approach, and I won't go into this too much, because you have these different levels of data, you have days within people, you have to capture and account for this nested nature, and so we use multi-level modeling. So you can see in the dotted lines you have 3 different person means. You have person 1 who has fairly high work-family conflict, that's in blue. In red, you have person 2 mean, sort of in the average, and then person 3 has low levels of work-family conflict. But if you look at the solid lines, you can see a different variability. Whereas person 1, they pretty much stick to and stay pretty close to their mean. There's not too much fluctuation day to day. Person 2 is very wide variability across that mean. And 3, you can see some fluctuation too. So really, you get to look at the different experiences of individuals and how they compare to their own mean, or their average across that 8 days. And my slides aren't cooperating with me. There's equations for those people that like equations, but basically what it's getting at is, like I said, you're looking at not only between person differences, you're accounting for that, but then you're looking at within person differences. So how are they different from their average on a daily basis? So to some of you, this might look like just a mess, but it's actually pretty fascinating to think about. So this is a spaghetti plot of daily work-family conflict. So to answer that first question about how much variability, or is there variability in work-family conflict? Well, yes, there is quite a bit. So each of these lines represents a different person. And it may be a little difficult to see from back there in the camera, but it's not just straight lines across the 8 days. You can see ups and downs across that day. And so the daily diary next steps is to see what predicts those spikes, those peaks and valleys. And then for the second question, we wanted to see how reactive people were to a daily basis. So first, we found that on average, employed parents with more work-family conflict had more negative affect. So that's really replicating past research that has looked at surveys where people report on the past month. But then the next thing that the daily diary is able to show us that is on days when parents had more work-family conflict than usual, they also had more negative affect. And this is controlling for stable differences between people. And then we looked at physiological reactivity to work-family conflict. And so here it was interesting to see that on days when parents had more work-family conflict than usual, they had a flatter decline in cortisol from before dinner to before bedtime. And so this is the picture that I had before. So essentially the blue line is showing how people need to dysregulate to wind down from the day. but actually those that had more work-family conflict, it was harder for them to come down or dysregulate after the day. So this shows that work-family conflict, daily work-family conflict, carries both psychological and physiological costs. And this paper really highlights the value of assessing day-to-day variability in work-family conflict. And this within-person associations of work-family conflict and negative affect and cortisol really provide stronger evidence than previous correlational studies that have used one-time assessments. And this really lends itself to finding ways to buffer the effects of work-family conflict if it cannot be prevented. And obviously a next step is to look at the effects of the intervention on daily work-family conflict. I'm only going to provide one slide for example too, but I want to highlight again that we have dyads. So we have employees and children that are talking about their experiences on the same 8 days. And so we can look at how parents' daily experiences may cross over and affect their children as well. And this is a preliminary finding that on days when parents reported high work-family conflict, their children reported more physical health problems than usual on that same day. So this really allows us to dive deeper and have a more detailed picture of how parents' work may affect their kids. And I just want to say that we're really excited as we're in the beginning stages of looking at how the STAR intervention affects daily family life. And we have a paper that I led that's coming out in Pediatrics next month, which actually shows that for the TOMO industry, parents that were in STAR increased their daily time with their children compared to the usual practice group. So there's a lot of exciting stuff to explore in the daily diary. Thank you.